And good morning. How's everyone doing today? It's good to see you. Boy, the light sure is weird here today. I hope everybody can see me well enough, and hopefully you can hear me enough. Coming to you live. Coming to you live from the University of Rijeka. I am in the library right now. Hopefully you can hear me. Imani, I accidentally had the homework 3 quiz set that you could only see one question at a time, and you couldn't go back to a question after you had finished it. So I reset that, Imani, so that it wouldn't be a problem for the students. That's all that was. Does that make sense? Good morning, Nicole. Good morning, Clara. Good morning, Marwa. Does that make sense, Imani? If you haven't started the homework yet, then it really won't matter to you at all. Okay, looks like we have 4 people today. Fantastic. We have an essay with 1 question. Right, but I had still had it set. I had it set so that you couldn't go back and look at the question after you did it. That's all. I just wanted to make sure that nobody had a problem, Imani. Okay? It was set so that maybe you couldn't go back and edit it while you were still working on it. Is that cool? Good morning, Ryan. Good morning, Shamek. Wow, good to see everybody today. How's my sound? Are you able to hear me well enough? I'm in a library, so I'm trying not to talk too loud. Hopefully you can still hear me. If you would, go ahead and give me a quick feedback and let me know how it's coming through. Imani says it's coming through clear, and it is loud enough, right? Fantastic. Okay, cool. I want to thank everybody for coming to the webinar last night. We had a great audience. I think there were 28 of you in class. That's absolutely amazing attendance and performance, and you folks are doing a really good job. I hope you found the video about genetic testing in Germany interesting. And I hope you sat down and thought real hard about what it means to face this kind of prenatal quandary and what it means to live a full life. That topic always is very sensitive to me, and I'm glad that each and every one of you decided to discuss it in very civil terms last night. So thank you again. Let's go ahead and get started with chapter 3 for you, childbirth. Sorry, that was last class's lecture. We're going to talk about childbirth today. How many of you have been through a childbirth? Either you've given birth to a child, or if you were like me, you were ringside when a child was born. I've been through 2 childbirths. I've seen 2 childbirths, I should say, not been through 2 childbirths. Have any of you been involved in the birth of a child one way or the other? Imani has 2. Fantastic. Nicole 1. Right, I saw your little baby the other day, Nicole, I think on video. Okay, we got a couple people who have done that. I'm going to assume the rest of you have not. That's fine. We're going to talk a little bit about what happens during childbirth, some childbirth choices, what it means to be small for date or low birth weight baby, and we'll talk about evaluating a newborn child. Holy cow, Chame's been through it once and she is pregnant now. No kidding. Wow. Okay, Nicole. Oh, maybe it was somebody. Maybe it was another Nicole. Yeah, you wouldn't have had a 16-year-old in your child. You know, Nicole, it's probably time for you to have another one, right? Nicole's saying, you're crazy, man. I'm not doing that again. So how did your birth go? How long did you labor? My wife, I think she labored 10 hours with the first baby, and I think it was 10 hours with the second baby. Nicole in all caps is like, no, right? My wife did it 8 to 10 hours both times. The first time was accidentally a natural childbirth because the doctors didn't give her the didn't give her the nerve block in time. And the second time, she had the nerve block, the epidural. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about prenatal care. One of the most important things you can do is get good prenatal care, including regular doctor's visits that will include the screening for manageable conditions that can affect the mother and the baby, as well as educational advice. If you're like me, our family, you probably went to a doctor for like the 12-week checkup, and then they just kept doing checkups. And what they're doing is looking at the mother's blood sugar. They're looking for potential genetic problems. The sonogram is where they try to see if all the baby's parts are growing normally and the baby's positioned correctly. And 1 a.m., okay, Shimei was a 12-hour. Nicole was a 12-hour. It's kind of brutal, isn't it, that it takes that long to get through? Honestly, childbirth didn't look too hard to me. Just kidding, don't you dare tell my wife I said that. But the cool thing is you need to go through the prenatal care. Now, Shimei, Nicole, any of you who went through childbirth, did you go to birthing classes? Did any of you have birthing classes? We had birthing classes, my wife and I, and we went to this lady who gave us all advice on how we should approach childbirth, what we should do. The person we went to tried to convince us that my wife needed to do natural childbirth instead of using the epidural. And you know, I think it's kind of, we didn't want to do the natural childbirth, my wife didn't, but this particular educator seemed to think that that was the best way to do that. Now, if you look, there are a couple of, your book's going to talk a little bit about educational programs that you might use. One of them is called the Centering Pregnancy, and this is an innovative program that includes complete prenatal care in a group setting. So you go through and do your prenatal diagnostic test, but they kind of combine that with the educational service as well. Nicole says she didn't do any birthing classes. Shimei did. Okay, so I guess not everybody does that. So it just depends upon what you want. Shimei said she found it very useful to have information about childbirth, which is cool. And it's cool as long as they're giving you information. But to be quite honest, the lady that we went to seemed to be more of she had stronger opinions, and we kind of felt a little bit challenged and convicted based upon some of the recommendations she made. She was a little pushy that way. Okay, so in the Centering Pregnancy, you do the 15-minute doctor visit, because if you've ever had the baby and gone to the prenatal visits, they don't take very long. Your doctor's just checking up on you during the pregnancy to make sure that everything's going smoothly. But then what they do is they include a 90-minute group support meeting and self-examination led by a doctor or certified midwife. So they kind of put the prenatal care and the educational program together. And more importantly, you do the educational program in a group setting. Usually you meet with the mothers, at least around 10 other mothers beginning at 12 to 16 weeks of pregnancy with the goal of self-empowerment. I guess being pregnant can be a very scary thing. It can be intimidating. And the idea is that when you meet in a group setting and talk about the challenges that everybody has, it makes you feel like you're not the only one going through these things. It can be very empowering for the mom. The neat thing is, because you make it sort of a social event, it increases the likelihood that moms will do their prenatal visits and not blow their prenatal visits off. If you're deciding to get pregnant or you are pregnant, it is very important that you attend your prenatal visits. Say they don't really address things for those like me that was doing adoption. That's a good point, Nicole. Nicole's birth and child birthing experience was a little bit different, And one of the problems is these group meetings or these educational settings, sometimes they're not as flexible as they could be, and they don't talk about all the different situations. Nicole's situation was quite unique, as she discussed in class in webinar last week. And so if any of you are interested in what it's like with Nicole, whose pregnancy involved adoption as well, she would probably be an interesting person to talk to. I'll bet she's got some life stories that would be very useful for you. Yeah, it's a good question. Imani wants to know, were there any special programs for cases just like yours? Wow, that's a great question. Nicole, maybe that's something that you could create. You probably went through that and had some challenges that you would like to have had addressed. That's a great idea, Imani. Wow, fantastic. Maybe you two should talk about that and come up with your own company. Sounds like a business idea, right? Now, it increases the number of prenatal visits by the mom. It makes this hard thing a more positive experience for the mom. And it increases the likelihood that the mother will choose breastfeeding. And there are people who say that breastfeeding your baby is a good thing because it allows the mom to pass some of her immunity directly to the child. Now, after having said that, I will tell you that my wife chose not to breastfeed. And if you choose not to breastfeed, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And don't let your provider judge you for that. Like I said, when my wife and I did our educational classes, our teacher had very strong beliefs about doing natural pregnancy and about breastfeeding. And my wife's opinion differed. And like I said, we felt a little bit judged during that situation. So if you do choose to go through one of these programs, which I'd advise, and it includes an educational component, remember that that person is there to provide you information and not to judge you. Okay? Great question, Imani, Nicole. Good comments. Now, one of the things that you probably ought to do during pregnancy is to make sure that you are living a healthy life. Now, your book talks a little bit about exercising during pregnancy. Now, I'm not talking going out there and running a marathon or lifting lots of weights, trying to increase your bench press or do squats. You're not necessarily, you don't need to do that. However, maintaining a level of activity is going to regulate your blood pressure and it's going to reduce the risk of hypertension. So my wife had I forget, gestational diabetes and gestational hypertension. And so exercising is going to help reduce the risk of that. It's going to condition the body, which is good for giving a baby. And here's the deal, you want to gain weight, you need to gain weight when you are pregnant, but you don't want to gain too much weight if you can avoid it. And so by exercising, maybe you can control that weight gain and it can regulate your ability to do your business. Again, my wife's pregnancy had all kinds of challenges, and one of them was constipation. And so exercising is going to increase your, it's going to decrease your blood pressure. It's going to make you feel better. It's going to control that weight gain, and it's maybe going to make some of those side effects of pregnancy less obnoxious for you. I don't know if any of you do yoga, but yoga is a good way to reduce stress. Being pregnant, having to prepare for a new baby is incredibly stressful. So yoga is going to be good for reducing stress, and it's also going to help and when you lower the stress, elevated stress is associated with an impairment in your immune system. So the hormones that float through your body when you're stressed out are decrease your immune functioning. So by reducing stress, you're going to improve your immune functioning. It's going to make you, you're going to have a better mental state, and you're less likely to have a C-section. Again, now if you've had a C-section, don't feel judged. But you know, anytime you are having a surgical procedure, there are risks associated with it. So if you're not interested in having a C-section, a little bit of exercise may help with that. And you know, they even suggest that if the mother is happy and healthy and has high well-being, that this is going to increase this is going to help the development of the neonatal brain. Okay, Nicole's typed in a comment here in the chat bar. It depends on a few factors because of the agency that she went through. The adoptive parents take on a lot of the responsibilities, providing aid or costs when needed. Cool, but did the agency take care of you, Nicole? You were the one doing the hard work. I wonder how much support the agency gave you. I'm glad they gave it to the parents. I'm glad the parents took on a big role. But you were the real star of that show, right, Nicole? And I'd be curious to see what kind of support they provided for you. Now, giving birth takes, from looking at people here, we were talking somewhere between 10 and 12 hours of laboring before you actually have that beautiful bundle of joy. Now, your book typically talks about the labor processes being broken down into 3 stages. During the first stage, your cervix, which is the opening of the uterus, is dilating. So it goes from, I think, 1 centimeter, which is really, really small, to 10 centimeters, which is going to allow that baby's head just enough room to start pushing out. And the first stage is when you have the uterine contractions as your uterus is dilating. And you're going to see these crampy pains that come, you're going to get like these waves of crampy pains. And you know what, I hate to describe this because I'm a dude and I shouldn't be talking about what it feels like to have a baby. If any of you ladies who know better than me can sort of explain what it feels like, other than saying it was hell, that might be useful to the rest of us. But from my wife's experience, from what I remember, she had these contractions which were very painful, and they would last up to a minute. And they start 15-20 minutes apart, and then they start getting closer and closer and closer together. And then at some point, and the doctor during this whole period, actually the nurses, are going to be measuring the amount of dilation. And when you're 10 centimeters dilated, you have finished the first stage of the delivery process. Now, I will tell you from our experience, we did not see the doctor at all during the first stage of the delivery process. You're pretty much in the hands of nurses. The doctor is like a rock star that's only going to come in for the second stage. And the second stage begins when the baby's head starts to move through the cervix. You are starting the delivery process. You move through the birth canal, and this can take anywhere from 45 minutes to 1 hour. And we say that the second stage is in when the baby completely emerges from the mother's body. You have delivered the baby. And then it's not over. The third stage, which is going to happen pretty quickly after that, is when the placenta and the umbilical cord and all of the support structures are going to come out as well. And this may only take a few minutes. And so this is how you can break down that 10 to 12 hour process that you are going to have. Now, here's the deal. I have talked to mothers, I've taught this class for a long time. I've talked to mothers who have had labor that only lasts 2 hours. And I've talked to mothers who have labored for over 24 hours. So there's great variation in the amount of time that it takes to go through these 3 stages of childbirth. And most of the time is the variation depends upon how long it takes for the cervix to dilate. Katie Bauer has given us a great description. Feels like someone is taking a belt and squeezing your hips intensely, but at the same time, the inside is cramping like a horrible Charlie horse. Oh, I hate a Charlie horse. My contractions also radiated down my legs. Holy crap, that sounds difficult, Katie. Amazing. Wow. Okay, they changed the worker. They didn't think the new one's being considered respectful. Wow, Nicole, it does sound like your adoptive parents were super nice, but they were really advocating for you. That must have felt good during what is always a challenging time, being pregnant. The baby is not moving in the second stage of a C-section. If the baby is not moving in the second stage, it's a C-section. You know, yes, and they're also measuring the baby's oxygen level. And if they think that the baby is at risk, or if the baby is in the breech position, or if they think that the baby's life or the mother's life is in danger, they're more likely to do the C-section. With my wife's first child, she was just having trouble getting the baby through the birth canal. They actually went in and used the forceps to pull my first son out. And when he came out, he had a couple of little abrasions on his head. The forceps are kind of like these salad spoons that they go in there and grab them. They can also use a suction and pull the baby out that way. And sometimes if the baby is in a breech position, the doctor will try to go in there and turn the baby around so that it comes out head first. The baby needs to come out head first. If it's feet first, that's breech position. Not good for a baby, right? Now, did you know that in the United States, 98.5% of births take place in hospitals? Of the few births that take place outside of hospitals, about 2/3 of them are going to occur at home, and then about 1/3 of them are going to occur in these things called birthing centers, which is where you may have a midwife or a doula, or they're not necessarily what you might call an official hospital, but they are a center that is equipped to deliver a baby. Now, typically, mothers are only going to have these births outside of the hospital if they are not at risk. If there is any risk, if there are any risk factors or potential difficulties that are expected, your doctor probably is going to try to encourage you to have that baby in a hospital. But if you're healthy, if the baby's healthy, if you're young, if there are no risk factors, then having a baby is kind of a natural process, and you don't necessarily need to be at a hospital. However, if anything starts to happen where the doctor or the midwife thinks that your baby is at risk, they're going to get you to a hospital as quickly as possible. Well, women have it rough. I think they're a little bit tougher than us, Ronique, if I'm being quite honest. Ronique, good point. Ronique was actually a police officer for a while. It was a police officer, right, Ronique? So you know how police officers always run into crazy situations. So clearly he's telling me he's seen birth in a hospital and in a van. You weren't involved in that birth, were you, Ronique? Did you actually have to help and assist in that birth? That sounds kind of crazy. Quick question. Did any of you mothers have your baby outside of a hospital, or did you have your baby in a hospital? I'd be interested in seeing, oh my God, he helped. Crazy. You're so funny and have a great attitude. It was probably cool that you were there, Ronique. Yeah, I'd be curious to know, which of you mothers had your baby at a hospital? Katie attended an accidental home birth. How in the world was it an accident? That's kind of interesting. Oh, you have to listen to instruction. Right, right. I'll bet that was, that would be pretty stressful, Ronique, being forced into that situation as a non-doctor all of a sudden. That's a lot of pressure, my friend. Now, different ways. Katie Bauer had all three at a hospital, planned a birth center birth, but my baby flipped breech during labor, so we transferred. There you go, as I suggested. Some people start in a birthing center, but if there's any problems at all, they're going to get you straight to the hospital. And it's not because the birthing center doesn't have the same knowledge, but there are going to be medical technologies and medical support things that can help the attending doctor or midwife if things get tricky. That's really cool. She labored she labored super fast. Right, Katie, how quickly did that mother take to go through her pregnancy? The record that I've heard from one of my students is 2 hours. A lady was giving birth to her fourth baby, and By the time they got her to the hospital, she was ready to deliver, and the whole process took 2 hours. Kind of crazy, right? Ronnie says his partner was throwing up and he was sweating. No doubt, man. No doubt. I'd imagine that. Now, there are different ways of giving childbirth. My wife and I chose to use a medicated birth. Now, the first birth, typically, they will do the epidural block, which is where they go into the spine and they do the nerve block, and it numbs the mother below the waist. And they told us that they wanted to do that, I think, between 4 to 6 centimeters. And then the doctor that was supposed to do that didn't get there in time. And so my wife was forced to deliver the first child without the epidural block, even though she had requested. Boy, she was super mad. So what they did with my wife is they gave her oral medication. I'm not exactly sure if it was barbiturates or a tranquilizer, but they gave my wife oral medication, and it didn't help nearly as much as the epidural, which is what she did for the second baby. Now, they will tell you if the mom is numb from the waist down, sometimes she's not able to push as well as she might otherwise be able to. And so they may be more likely to have to go in there with the forceps or the suction cup. But I will tell you that with our first baby, the doctors gave my wife enough oral medication that she was too high to really push. And they had to go in with the forceps, even with the oral medication, right? The doctor met you outside to cut the placenta, and she had to go to intensive care to treat all the bacteria. Yeah, I guess in the back of a van, that's not going to be a very clean place to have to give birth to a baby. Katie Bauer says it was a 3-hour labor. She just went from feeling crampy to baby in the arms in about 45 minutes. Wow. And Katie had a client whose labor was in an hour. These babies do what they want. You know, Katie's right. I can sit here and tell you how long it's supposed to take and give you an average. But little babies are unpredictable creatures, and who knows how long or what it will be like when that baby is born. Thank you, Katie. I appreciate you adding that. Back labor can cause a lot of women not to realize they're in labor back pains until they are basically in the final stage. Really, Nicole? I didn't know that. I hadn't heard that. That's kind of interesting. Now, another method that they talk about is natural childbirth. So they try to, at least this was our doctor, our birthing coach that my wife and I went to the first time. What she did was she tried to educate you about the whole process to help my wife understand that the pain wasn't going to be overwhelming and that it was going to be okay. So the idea is this doctor tried to educate my wife about the childbirth and to teach her how to relax so that she could give birth without the use of the epidural. Again, if you choose the epidural, it does not mean you are less of a mom. Some people kind of feel that way, but it really doesn't. But you know, if you want to have natural childbirth, it might be cool to have somebody to kind of coach you through this process. And during the training, the birthing training that my wife and I went to, they told me what was going to happen, and they tried to train me so that I could help coach my wife as she went through this process. There's also the Lamaze method. So what they do is they try to teach you. And Katie, you may want to help here because I'm not as clear on this. But the idea is that they teach you how to birth. And the birthing, and so the breathing technique is to sort of help you manage the pain and to control pushing in the final stages of labor. Katie, if you want to type in the chat bar and let us know what the breathing technique is used for, the way you teach it, that would be really cool. Supposedly we didn't do the Lamaze method, but from what I understand, they talked to you about the anatomy and physiology of the process. And again, the whole idea is just to provide you an education about what's going to happen. If you have more knowledge and less anxiety, that's going to decrease the level of pain that you feel. So I'm told. Then again, I'm a guy, so I can't say anything about how hard pregnant having a baby is or is not. So be sure not to listen to me if you have a mom to tell you what's going on. Katie says they don't quite focus on the hee hee hoo hoo breathing much anymore. Slow, deep breathing is what we talk about now, except for crowing when you may need to blow out the candle. This is mostly to allow controlled pushing at the end and reduce tearing. Uh, right. Sometimes when the baby is born, is it crowning? Oh, crowning. Okay. I was wondering what crowing was. I'm like, I'm going to go with it because Katie knows what she's talking about. Crowning. Okay, so crowning is when the baby's head actually appears at the cervix, right, Katie? That's sort of when that, I guess that's when the second stage of delivery is occurring. Now, right, she does mention something about tearing. You know, you're giving birth to a big baby from a very small opening, and sometimes the perineum is going to tear. Katie, does that always happen? Or, excuse me, comes out of the perineum, not the cervix. I'm sorry, I misspoke. When you finally see the baby's head, that's called crowning. Katie, is there always tearing involved, and it's just worse sometimes for others, or can moms give babies without tearing of the perineum down there? Shamay said in the first one, she chose not to do the epidural. I gave birth naturally, but it was so hard. And now I'm thinking to take the epidural during my Labor Day. Right, we did the same thing. It was first was natural for my wife, actually was medicated, but it wasn't the epidural. My wife was much more comfortable with the second baby. Again, I'm not here trying to talk you into getting an epidural, but my wife's experience was that her second birth was much easier than her first birth. And Katie says that there's not always tearing, and it depends on many, many factors. And Katie, I guess if it tears, is there usually a little surgical repair that is done? And you can go ahead and type in the chat bar. Now, sometimes they will engage in cesarean delivery, which is where they surgically remove the baby from the mother's uterus through an abdominal incision. And I think, Katie, do they cut this transverse or do they cut up and down? I think they go side to side, don't they? Right? Yeah, Katie is a birth doula. Wow, she's probably should be teaching this class rather than me. You know what I mean? So twins were breached, so I gave birth to a wow. So Clara had first natural, but then both of her babies were breached, and she had two of them. So they went in and did the surgical procedure. Katie's going to say that most repairs are minor suturing, rarely, or repair is needed. Okay, so they don't always tear or have to surgically repair the perineum. Fantastic. Now, as it says here, cesarean delivery is typically used in case of breech position. If the baby's in distress and they don't think it will be born naturally in time, if the mother is bleeding, or in my wife's case, the first baby we had, she was so high on the oral medication that they didn't know if she was going to be able to push the baby out. So if they hadn't been able to get the baby with the forceps, the next option for my wife's first baby was going to be a cesarean section. Now, there are debates over the benefits versus the risk. Cesareans, definitely it reduces the risk of, the baby being harmed while trying to be born. If the baby's breech, it can sometimes be deadly to the baby and or the mother. However, a cesarean C-section is a medical procedure, and all medical procedures carry some degree of risk. And what they say is that here in the United States, we have more cesarean sections than in other countries. And I think what I'm told and it says respiratory complications. They're measuring the child's oxygen level. And my wife had an induced labor the second time. They gave her the Pitocin to start the contractions, Katie, and they actually, for some reason, it affected the baby, and they were monitoring my second son's oxygen level, and it dropped low. They actually they stopped the Pitocin and were very concerned about my child's respiratory function during the birth, and they almost gave her a C-section for the second baby as well. Katie, do you have anything to add regarding C-sections that you think the class might be interested in? Go ahead and do that if you want. We'd love to hear that. Wow. Thanks, Katie. I really appreciate you giving us the doula's experience here, and I appreciate all of you ladies sharing your birth experiences. Me and Ramik and any of the other guys in here are just sitting here going, wow, this is interesting, because we don't know nearly as much as you moms or you doulas do, right? Okay. Now, doctors love to evaluate. Holy cow, we love to evaluate. One of the first tests your child is going to get is right after they're born. And I'll bet you Katie Bauer even knows what an APGAR test is. About 1/3 of the births in the U.S. are C-sections in the U.S., but there's work being done to lower that, as it's ideal for it to be lower. It's a great tool to have when you need it. Great. But I think you're right, some people think of it as a convenience measure, but it does have risks, so it's not to be used lightly. Maybe Katie would agree with that statement. And as the doula, Katie, feel free to correct me if I say anything that is wrong. Now, after your baby is born, the first thing they need to know is whether or not your baby needs to go to the ICU. Some babies are born and they are in distress. Now, if you've ever been in a birthing room, like Katie and I and any of these mothers, they are pretty chaotic situations. A new baby's born, you've got people running in and out of the room, things are happening. And what we need is a simple test that can quickly tell that doctor if your baby is in need of emergency care. Most babies are going to be born healthy and happy, and there's nothing wrong. But if your baby is born in physical distress, under the threat of dying or being really, really sick, the doctors want a quick and simple way in order to evaluate that. The APGAR test is a 5-point test, or a 5-dimensional test that can be done in, I don't know, probably 10 seconds. You can evaluate on 5 different dimensions. And what you do is your baby gets a score somewhere between 0 and 10. 0 and 10. And so you get five dimensions: heart rate, respiratory effort, muscle tone, body color, reflex irritability. And on each of those dimensions, you can get a score of 0, 1, or 2. So if you were to have a 0 across all 5 dimensions, the baby would probably be born, it would probably be a stillbirth, and that would be a 0. On the other hand, very few babies are going to receive a 10. Hey, how you doing? Katie, real quick, when you evaluate, do you evaluate babies with the APGAR test? And what is the typical score? Do you see many babies get a 10? I'll bet Katie probably knows that, so I'd be interested in hearing her opinion. So the first thing they do is take your pulse. If your baby's heart rate is not beating at least 100 beats, you're going to get less than a 2. Katie doesn't do the evaluation. Most babies get an 8 at 1 minute and a 9 at 5 minutes. So as it says right here, okay, she doesn't think she's ever seen a baby get a 10. Okay, I'm one of those over-functional school students, so I was disappointed when my kids didn't get 10s, but it doesn't happen. Wow, Imani had a 10. Oh, and Imani, you were the one that said last night that they told you your baby was sick, right? And your baby got a stinking 10, which tells you an awful lot about how accurate some prenatal tests can be, right? Okay, and so you get 0, 1, or 2, respiratory effort. They want to see that that baby is breathing and is breathing well. The muscle tone, They want that baby to be moving about and kicking around. They want that baby to be pink and not blue. Pink means that baby's got oxygen. Blue means that baby doesn't have any oxygen. And it is better if your baby is born coughing, sneezing, and crying. The healthiest babies are the ones that are pissed when they're born. You want that baby just to be angry and crying. Boy, that sure means your baby is healthy, right? And so you're going to get a score somewhere between 0 and 10. If your baby gets a 7 or better on the first two tests, 1 and 5 minutes, that means more than likely your baby is healthy and there's no need for emergency. But what they want, if that baby gets less than a 7, they're going to keep giving them that APGAR test. If you would, so she got a 9, okay. Katie, how long before they decide to take the baby to the ICU? So if you score less than 7, they're going to keep testing that baby. And what they want is that baby score to get up in the 7 range before they know that that baby is out of the woods. So the APGAR, it's a super test, and it's super easy to administer, and it's a great way of knowing accurately whether or not that baby is in distress when they are born. Now, here's the deal. Low APGAR scores are associated with like an immediate life risk, and they can also be signs of some sort of a longer lasting problem. Okay, scoring 7 or more is reassuring to your doctor. They try to avoid that, she says. In all of our local hospitals, they'll take the baby to the warmer in the room first. Yeah, they have a little baby cooker, a little a heat lamp that they'll put the baby under. And they try to suction and give the oxygen, I guess, to clear the pathway, the airways out so that the baby can breathe. Thank you very much, Katie. All right, now, Katie, I don't know if you have any knowledge about more thorough infant assessments. You're typically involved in the immediate process of birthing. But after that, they can also, and I'm not sure if they always do this, and it may depend upon whether or not they think your baby's at risk, but there are sort of other neonatal assessments to assess the quality of neurological development, how well your baby's nervous system is developed. And the neat thing about the Brazelton Neonatal Behavioral Assessment Scale is that it is also used in research to sort of see if there are any predictive factors that can tell us whether or not children are going to have some sort of long-lasting neurological problems. And they're looking at your baby's infant reflexes. I think we talked about that in Psych 150. I talked about the immature reflexes that babies are born with that tend to disappear during the first half of the first year. They're looking at your baby's startle response. They're looking at your baby's cuddliness. They're looking to see how mature their motor behaviors are. They have specific expectations about what newborns should be able to do, and whether or not your baby is able to respond to new things and calm down after seeing them. That's called the ability to habituate. They look for them around an hour after birth when they do a head-to-toe assessment, but I also retain reflexes with children that don't get integrated can lead to motor problems later. There you go, right. So these infant reflexes that we are born with are supposed to go away. And Katie is right when she says when these reflexes don't go away, they are indicative of neurological problems, right? Now, they also have another one called the NNNS, the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit Neurobehavioral Scale, which is a comprehensive assessment for the neurological integrity and behavioral function. They're really interested in that, in the development of the nervous system. Did you know that your nervous system is not fully matured until 25 years of age? And the first 2 years of age, your baby's nervous system is really incomplete. So doctors are super duper interested in assessing the quality of your neurological development, especially during the first 2 years of your child's life. They're looking at your reflexes, again, similar to the Brazelton. You want these reflexes to be there at the beginning, and then you want them to slowly disappear over the first half of the first year. And they're looking at your child's ability to engage in their neurobehavioral organization, their ability to move body parts, and they're also going to look at your child's ability to control their functioning, sort of their responses to stress and their ability to manage their neurological responses. Thank you very much, Katie. All right. Katie, low birth weight infant is a baby that weighs less than 5.5 pounds at birth. A very low birth weight is 3.5 pounds, and extremely low is 2 pounds. Katie, what's the lowest birth weight baby you have ever seen be born? And we also talk about babies that are preterm. I think if your baby is born before 37 weeks of gestation, that is called a preterm baby. All right. Now, and then you can also talk about babies. So if a baby is born at 35 weeks or 30 weeks, of course, you're not expecting them to be the average 7-pound baby that they are. So they also look at how big your baby is based upon at what age they're born. So if your baby is born at 30 weeks of pregnancy, of course, they're not going to be 7 pounds, but they are supposed to be a certain weight, and they'll actually look to see if the baby is at least as big as it should be based upon how old it is in terms of gestation. She had clients who had a baby who was born at 28 weeks due to preeclampsia, and she was 2 pounds. She's a healthy 1.5 years old now. Does this baby have any developmental problems or neurological problems, Katie? I've been told that children who are of low birth weight are more likely to have some sort of developmental problems, and these developmental problems can last until much later in life. Yeah, as it says here, more health and cognitive development problems for these children than ones with normal birth weight, who are born with a normal birth weight and a normal gestational period. Now, with these low birth weight babies, I don't know if you call it kangaroo care, this textbook calls it, but one of the things that they find is that low birth weight babies, one of the best things you can do for them is hold them and let them touch your skin, and call it kangaroo care or whatever, but having the baby against your skin, kind of like this mother right underneath me, is really good, and it helps these low birth weight babies pick up their weight super duper quick. Okay, so muscle tone is a struggle for her, and she's developmentally behind. Yeah, having a 2-pound baby. Yeah, the baby, I'm glad the baby's alive, glad the baby's healthy, but you're probably going to expect problems later on associated with that low birth weight baby. Right now, if you take these low birth weight babies and you give them lots of skin-to-skin contact, you're going to see better respiratory and cardiovascular functioning, sleep patterns, and cognitive functioning from 6 months to 10 years. So doing this kangaroo care is really going to help these children who already start out behind the 8 ball, so to speak. And it's going to help their emotional functioning as well. And you can see down here, there are lots of factors that have been related to the benefits of kangaroo care. These children later on in life are going to have better social skills, they're going to do better in school, and they're going to have less emotional and behavioral problems. Okay? Okay, the postpartum period, we typically talk about that period after childbirth that lasts until the mother's body has completed its adjustment and is returned to a nearly pre-pregnant state. The book says 6 to 8 weeks. Katie, you're the pro here, and you've been around a lot of babies being born. Do mothers return to normal within 8 weeks? And the mom's body is going to have to try to get back to normal, and she's going to have to try to get over the, I don't want to say trauma, but having a baby is a really tough thing, and it's not like you're going to bounce back the next day and be completely back to normal. And so we typically talk about this postpartum period as being a month and a half, 2 months. And Katie, I'll wait for her to type in here and tell me if she thinks that's a reasonable expectation for this postpartum period. So estrogen and progesterone levels are going to drop steeply when the placenta is delivered, and they remain low until the ovaries start producing hormones again. So this is sort of one of the physical changes that occurs. Your mom's going to be so gassed and tired. When you take that new baby home, I'm telling you that after 3 days of being in the hospital, they're going to hand you a baby and kick you right out. You're going to have to get in your car and go home. Dude, you are going to be stressed out and nervous. I don't care how much you prepare for. Taking a new baby home, especially the first time, is a scary, scary, scary event. And you know what? When you get home, your baby's not going to sleep well for the first 6 to 8 weeks, and you're going to be stressed out. Hopefully, you've got a good male partner to help with that new baby. If not, you're going to have trouble with it. You may have some arguments in the family, and you know it's just going to be hard to make good decisions when you're so stressed out, arguing with your partner, and nervous about being a new mom. It takes closer to a year for the body to completely rebuild mineral and vitamin stores, especially if lactating. I feel like the 6 to 8 weeks mostly applies to the uterus healing. Okay, that's a good point. So physically you're back, but really it's a long journey. It took you 10 months to make this baby. Katie said it takes you 10 months to probably get over making this baby. That's great. Postpartum depression. Some mothers will suffer depression and anxiety when they bring that new baby home. It's going to be difficult to cope with the daily tasks during the postpartum period. And you know, typically it says feelings peak 3 to 5 days after giving birth. You know why 3 to 5 days? Because that's when you leave the hospital and all your support falls away. And it's just you, an overwhelmed parent, and your new baby. And you know, if you have a little bit of that and it goes away, we might call that the postpartum blues. But if those feelings of anxiety and depression don't go away, you may be diagnosed as having postpartum depression, right? Now, what are some risk factors for that? If you're the kind of person that was suffering from depression and anxiety while pregnant, if you maybe had a low self-esteem, or you have a partner who is not helping you out, or any social support, you're more likely to experience postpartum depression. And you know, if the mom's depressed, this is going to have impacts. This can have impacts on the baby later on in life. And you know, it says here that the father experiencing depression can also affect the infant. And if both parents are stressed out and suffering, they're not going to bond with that baby as well. And it's very important that you create a strong bond between the mother or the parents and the child during the first year of life. It is, or the caregivers, not parents, but caregivers during the first year of life. It may not be a father, and again, in some cases, the mom is involved with an adoption agency. She may not even have the baby. So whoever's there over the first year, it's really important that they bond with that baby and give them a feeling of security. Okay, that's all I had to say today regarding pregnancy and delivery. I'm going to be quite honest, it was very anxiety producing knowing that I was having my lecture attended by a true birthing professional, a doula. Katie, I hope I was accurate enough to pass muster. I'm not looking for an A+, but if I got a C today, I'll consider it a winner, right? Okay, Thursday night, so your first post for the weekly discussion board is due. Even if you came to webinar last night, if you want to get that extra credit, you have to make your first post tonight. If you're not interested in the extra credit and you came to webinar, then you're good for the next 2 weeks. But make sure that you go do that discussion board night so you can get that extra credit. And I love having, unlike some teachers who don't like it when a professional's in their class, it's kind of cool to me because people like you, I'm just a teacher. A professional like you can really give us a lot more knowledge and I think makes the class more interesting. It's always cool when you have a professional in class. And folks, we were lucky enough to have Katie to join us today and help us. Folks, y'all have a great day. Do your discussion board, your homework. Have a good weekend, and I will see you next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Take care and have a great day.